the question that I often get, whether or not ejaculation adjusts testosterone levels. And it turns out that sex and ejaculation itself does not reduce testosterone levels, although it will increase prolactin levels. However, abstinence or sex without ejaculation for a week or more will increase testosterone levels up to 400%. So the answer is actually complicated. It's not straightforward. What it means is that sex itself increases testosterone. However, abstinence also increases testosterone even further. Testosterone promotes sex-seeking behavior. And the real question then is, does sex itself promote testosterone? And the answer is somewhat complicated, but the short version is yes. And as you recall, sex has multiple stages. So there's the physical act of sex, there's the seeking of sex, and then there's orgasm and ejaculation. Now, it's important to distinguish between these because whether or not sex itself increases testosterone depends on whether or not the male ejaculates. On a previous episode, I mentioned how dopamine increases with sexual activity. Remember, dopamine and testosterone tend to increase linearly with one another. But then after ejaculation, there's a release of prolactin, and prolactin actually sets the refractory period in males during which he can't have sex again. And the duration of the refractory period will vary tremendously depending on how much and how long that prolactin release occurs.
In males, it's interesting to point out that testosterone is promoting seeking of sex, but it's also estrogen in males that's important for libido. If estrogen levels are brought too low, then men will completely lose their libido. This is often not discussed or overlooked. In the discussion about testosterone therapy and performance-enhancing drugs, people think that hyperandrogenized individuals, meaning people that have very high levels of androgen, will have very high levels of libido. And they will, provided estrogen is available in sufficient ratios to match that testosterone.
So it's not simply the case that high levels of testosterone produce a lot of sex and mating behavior, and low levels of estrogen are good across the board. You actually need both in both males and females. It's just that in females, the testosterone levels are always going to be lower than the estrogen levels, and in males, the estrogen levels are always going to be lower than testosterone. Masturbation and pornography are potently tapping into the dopamine system and can undermine the very processes of which I consider healthy processes of finding a mate, dating, communication, eventually, if it's appropriate, sexual interaction,
etc.
Like
it's undermining pair bonding.
And pair bonding.
So here's a question: if you're seeking sexual release through pornography and you go through the whole cycle and you get a prolactin release, do you bond with yourself?
So this is very interesting. The biology explains it as what's left there is a kind of an open loop, a kind of an emptiness. Right? Because bonding with the self is a complicated notion. I mean, there's a healthy version of that, of course, loving oneself and self-referencing. And again, this is more far more your domain than mine.
DHEA has been promoted as kind of a catch-all for increasing testosterone and estrogen in males and females, and indeed, DHEA will increase both testosterone and estrogen. This is something to be mindful of if you're thinking about taking DEA or you're taking DHEA already. DEA will increase both testosterone and estrogen, and the extent to which it increases one or the other will depend on whether or not you're starting off with more estrogen than testosterone, or whether or not you're starting off with more testosterone than estrogen.
There was a study published in 2011 from Escasa et al., ESCASA. This is the stuff of textbooks. This is on PubMed. These are quality studies showing that men who observe sex, so I guess this would be observing pornography, will have slight increases in testosterone during the observation. These people actually were willing to have blood draws taken while watching pornography. They had increases in testosterone that were very modest, of about 10%. Whereas when people participated in sex, they actually did this study where people had blood draws and they had real sex with their partners, and they had 70% increases in testosterone. So there are increases in testosterone that are quite significant during the physical act of sex, and far less so during observing sex. But in the absence of a real partner there, absence of real sexual partner, there's an open loop of neurochemicals, including oxytocin and prolactin. So this kind of low that people fear is putting them into an amotivated state. We can think of this, if I were to kind of expand on it, would be, it's this kind of neurochemical, psychological equivalent of making your home environment filthy for a while, not actually putting you into this positive amplification of dopamine. So it depletes the dopamine system.
There was a scientific study done in Hangzhou, China, in a university, where they basically did an experiment where they took a group of guys and measured their hormone levels. They took blood tests on them every day, and basically what the test determined was that there's a huge peak in your testosterone level on day 7 of practicing semen retention.
It's completely natural for testosterone levels to decrease over time. In fact, almost half of men over the age of 80 have low testosterone. But younger men can be troubled with symptoms of low testosterone too, especially those who are overweight or have certain underlying health conditions like diabetes and sleep apnea.
So in this study, they took 28 men, and these men were from ages 21 to 45, so a bit of a variety in their age, and they split the men into 2 groups. So one group was to go 8 days without ejaculating. They were to retain their semen for 8 days. The other group just ejaculated as normal daily. So again, they did blood tests on the 2 different groups every day to measure what was happening with their hormones, what was happening in their bodies. And what they found was that on day 7, every single one of the guys who were retaining their semen had a huge peak in their testosterone level on day 7. So this peak ranged from about 121% in some guys to the highest was 195%, their base testosterone level. So the average was about 150%. So each guy who was retaining his semen on day 7 had this 150% testosterone peak, but the guys who were ejaculating regularly, they did not have this. And what they found in the study was that there was no significant difference between the different age groups, but also after day 7, the high testosterone level went back down to about normal. So what this shows is that there's this sort of cycle in the male body where after an ejaculation, when you go 7 days without ejaculating, the testosterone boosts significantly on that 7th day.
Masturbation alone doesn't have much of an impact on your T levels. The hormone changes associated with masturbation can cause some short-term effects, but ejaculation caused by masturbation won't have any long-term impact on your sexual health or overall well-being. Personal and emotional issues can affect T levels, though. If you notice signs of low testosterone while also experiencing difficulties in your relationship, consider therapy for yourself or for you and your partner. Communicating openly about your personal or sex life may help you resolve issues that could be causing a drop in your T levels.
When you practice semen retention, because about a week in, you feel super energized, you feel very motivated, you just feel that masculine charge of energy, like you want to go out and do something, you want to go lift some weights, you get things done. So it's very apparent that practicing semen retention has this benefit of increased hormone levels in the body, increased testosterone. So if you want to get these benefits of semen retention, then you definitely want to go at least a week at a time between ejaculations. So just to sum it up, when you practice semen retention, on day 7 you have this huge peak in your testosterone level, and this is backed up by science.
Research has shown that lifting heavier weights is the best form of exercise to boost testosterone, says Dr. Jadek. As muscle mass increases, it will trigger the body to produce more testosterone. He suggests performing 2 sets of 3 to 5 reps at 95% of your maximum effort, targeting larger muscle groups like the quadriceps, hamstrings, back, and chest. But don't ignore smaller muscle groups like the biceps, calves, and shoulders. Strengthening your entire body helps prevent injury and speeds up your metabolism.